The wind howled through the narrow streets of Minneapolis's outer suburbs, carrying a biting chill that seeped into Malik Turner's bones as he trudged along the snow-covered sidewalk. At 22, Malik was no stranger to harsh winters in Minnesota, but this one felt particularly unforgiving. He'd moved from a small northern town just months ago, seeking something better than the dead-end jobs and sidelong glances he'd grown up with. Here in this middle-class enclave where white picket fences and manicured lawns dominated young black men like him were anomalies, watched not with curiosity, but with quiet suspicion. Every store clerk's lingering stare, every neighbor's hurried step away, reminded him he was an outsider in a place that prided itself on order and familiarity. His rented room was a cramped basement unit in a faded apartment building, the kind where heat was unreliable, and the landlord asked few questions as long as rent came on time. To make ends meet, Malik had taken a gig hauling furniture for a local moving company. It was backbreaking work, but it paid enough to keep him afloat. He kept his head down, avoided eye contact, and focused on survival. Drawing attention was a luxury he couldn't afford, but trouble found him anyway. A few weeks back at the company's warehouse, a toolbox had gone missing. No one had seen anything, no one claimed responsibility. The supervisor, a grizzled man with a perpetual scowl, zeroed in on Malik without hesitation. "This kind of thing, it's gotta be you or one of your buddies," he'd said, his voice laced with accusation. Malik protested, explaining he'd been on the other side of the building, but his words fell on deaf ears. The other workers shuffled their feet, avoiding his gaze. In the end, it didn't matter what the truth was. Prejudice filled in the blanks. With a curt dismissal, the supervisor handed him his final check. "We can't have untrustworthy folks around here." The label stuck like glue, unreliable, dishonest. It was a stain on his record that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Now, jobless and desperate, Malik spent his days pounding the pavement, resume in hand. The snow crunched under his worn boots as he approached yet another industrial park, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Doors slammed shut with polite rejections. "We need certified experience." "Sorry, positions are filled." But the subtext was always there. The quick scan of his dark skin, his simple clothes, his name scrawled at the top of the page. "This isn't the place for you." Each no chipped away at him, but he pressed on, hunger gnawing at his stomach and the weight of bills pressing on his shoulders. One particularly brutal afternoon, with the temperature dipping below zero and his toes numb in his threadbare shoes, Malik sought refuge from the cold. He ducked into the gleaming lobby of North Star Innovation, a towering tech conglomerate whose headquarters loomed over the suburbs like a beacon of progress. The building was a stark contrast to the gritty world outside: polished marble floors, sleek glass partitions, and well-dressed professionals, bustling about with purpose. Behind the reception desk stretched an open cafe area reserved for executives, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and the hum of low conversations. Malik lingered near the entrance, rubbing his hands together for warmth, not intending to stay long. He felt out of place, like an intruder in this pristine space. That's when she appeared, Lila Chen, the 32-year-old CEO of North Star, emerging from a conference room down the hall. She moved with effortless authority, her slim frame clad in a tailored suit that accentuated her sharp features and no-nonsense demeanor. Known in industry circles as the Iron Lady of Innovation, Lila had built her reputation on bold decisions and unyielding standards. Her mixed European-Asian heritage had taught her early on about navigating biases, but she'd turned those lessons into fuel for success. Spotting Malik shivering by the doors, his coat dusted with snow and his expression weary, Lila paused. Most people would have walked by, but something in his quiet resilience caught her eye. She approached, her voice steady and low, carrying the weight of someone used to being heard. "You okay looking for someone here?" Malik hesitated, his instincts screaming caution. Interactions with people like her, powerful, polished, rarely ended well for him, but the cold had worn him down and honesty slipped out. "Just trying to warm up, ma'am. Been out all day looking for work. Got fired recently over something I didn't do. Folks assume because of..." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at himself, the implication clear. Lila listened without interrupting, her expression unchanging. When he finished, she nodded once, pulling a notepad from her bag. "My company doesn't do handouts or special hires," she said firmly. "But if you're serious about proving yourself, I can point you in a direction." She scribbled an address, the North Star manufacturing plant on the city's southern edge, and handed it to him. Go there, ask for the manager. Mention my name, Lila Chen. Tell them I sent you for the night shift in tech assembly. But understand this, no one's going to go easy on you, especially not looking like you do around here. Show up, work hard, and earn it. Malik took the paper, his fingers brushing hers briefly. He searched her face for pity or ulterior motives, but found none, just a straightforward challenge. Thank you, he murmured, unsure if this was a lifeline or another setup for disappointment. Lila gave a curt nod and turned away, her heels clicking against the floor as she disappeared back into her world. For the first time in weeks, a spark of possibility flickered in Malik's chest, though doubt lingered like the frost on his coat. Malik arrived at the North Star manufacturing plant on the southern edge of Minneapolis just as the first shift was winding down. The facility was a sprawling complex of gray warehouses, humming with the relentless drone of machinery and the sharp clang of metal on metal. Snow piled against the chain-link fence, and the air carried the metallic tang of oil and exhaust. This was no glossy headquarters. It was the gritty underbelly of the company where blue-collar workers clocked in and out, their faces etched with fatigue. For Malik, it was a chance, a slim one, but better than the endless rejections he'd faced elsewhere. He clutched the slip of paper Lila had given him, his fingers stiff from the cold. The manager's office was a cramped trailer at the edge of the lot, its windows fogged from the heater inside. Malik knocked, and a gruff voice barked, "Come in." Inside, Mr. Harris sat behind a cluttered desk, a burly man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and a perpetual squint. He looked up from his paperwork, his eyes narrowing as they took in Malik's appearance, faded jacket, scuffed boots, and the unmistakable hue of his skin. "You're the one Miss Chen sent?" Harris asked, leaning back in his chair with a skeptical grunt. He snatched the note from Malik's hand, scanning it quickly. Huh, unusual. CEO doesn't usually play matchmaker for hires. Malik stood straight, meeting the man's gaze. "I'm here to work, sir, whatever you need." Harris chuckled dryly. "We'll see about that. This ain't no cushy office job. We got quotas, heavy lifts, and no room for slackers. If you can't hack it, you're out, no second chances." Malik nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat. He signed the probationary forms, his hand steady despite the unease churning inside. Harris led him into the main building, a vast space filled with conveyor belts, robotic arms, and stacks of components for North Star's tech gadgets. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the concrete floor. Workers in coveralls glanced up as they passed, their expressions ranging from indifference to outright suspicion. "New guy," Harris announced to no one in particular. "Show him the ropes or don't, up to you." The first task was straightforward but grueling, unloading crates from a delivery truck and sorting them into storage bays. Malik's muscles burned after the first hour, the cold seeping through the loading dock doors, making every lift feel twice as heavy. He worked methodically, stacking boxes with precision, ignoring the ache in his back, but the whispers started almost immediately. Two older workers nearby muttered under their breath, "Another diversity hire, bet he's just filling a quota. Yeah, won't last. These kids think it's easy money." Malik pretended not to hear, focusing on the rhythm of the work. By mid-shift, sweat soaked his shirt despite the chill, and his hands were raw from the rough cardboard. During a brief break, he grabbed a water bottle from the communal cooler, only to find a group of men clustered around it, laughing at some inside joke. One of them, a stocky guy with a faded tattoo on his arm, eyed Malik. "You from around here don't look like it." Malik forced a neutral smile. "Just moved to the suburbs, looking for steady work." The man snorted. "Steady good luck. Place like this chews up and spits out folks who don't fit." The words stung, but Malik bit back any retort. He'd learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Instead, he returned to his station, pushing through the fatigue. As the night wore on, the plant grew quieter, the day crew filtering out and the skeleton night shift taking over. Malik's assignment shifted to cleaning up debris, scrap metal, wiring scraps, and dust from the assembly lines. It was menial, but he tackled it with the same diligence, sweeping methodically until the floor gleamed under the lights. Around midnight, as Malik was wiping down a workbench, the side door creaked open. A gust of icy wind rushed in, followed by Lila Chen herself. She wasn't in her executive attire this time. A long wool coat hugged her frame and her hair was tied back simply. She scanned the floor, her sharp eyes landing on Malik. He straightened, surprised but not entirely shocked. She'd warned him she'd be watching. "Evening," she said quietly, approaching with measured steps. The few remaining workers glanced over but quickly returned to their tasks, sensing her authority. Malik wiped his hands on a rag. "Ms. Chen, didn't expect you here." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "I like to check on things personally. How's the first night?" He hesitated, then opted for honesty. "Tough. Folks aren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat." Lila's gaze softened just a fraction. "I won't promise it'll get easier. This place runs on results, not handouts. But if you prove yourself, they'll come around. Remember, no one's paving the way for you. Earn it, and you'll have my respect and theirs." Her words lingered as she left the door, shutting behind her with a final click. Malik exhaled, a mix of determination and doubt swirling in his chest. The night stretched on the machine's hum, a constant companion. By shift's end, as dawn broke gray and cold outside, Malik clocked out, his body aching, but his resolve intact. This was just the beginning, and he knew the real tests were yet to come. The weeks blurred into a relentless grind at the North Star plant, each day a test of Malik's endurance. The cold Minneapolis nights seeped into the warehouse, turning the concrete floors into slabs of ice and making every shift feel like a battle against both the elements and the unspoken hostility around him. Malik arrived early and left late, his body adapting to the rhythm of heavy lifting and monotonous tasks. But the physical demands paled compared to the psychological toll, the constant undercurrent of judgment that followed him like a shadow. Mr. Harris seemed determined to push him to his limits. "This ain't a charity gig," the manager barked one morning, assigning Malik to scrub the oily residue from a row of decommissioned machines. "If you're here for an easy ride, doors that way." Malik nodded silently, grabbing a bucket and brush without complaint. He knew arguing would only fuel the fire. As he worked, the whispers from his co-workers echoed in the vast space. "Kid's tough, but how long before he snaps? Bet he's just waiting for a handout." One particularly vocal veteran, a wiry man named Tom, leaned against a crate during lunch break. "You think the boss lady pulled strings 'cause she feels sorry for types like you?" He sneered, his voice carrying just far enough for Malik to hear. Malik kept his head down, eating his sandwich alone in a corner. He'd learned to let the barbs slide off, but each one left a mark. Still, he pushed harder, volunteering for overtime, double-checking his work to avoid any slip that could be twisted against him. His muscles ached constantly, and sleep came in fitful bursts in his chilly basement room, but quitting wasn't an option. Not when this job was his only shot at stability. Amid the grind, Lila's messages became a quiet lifeline. They arrived sporadically, always concise, holding up, or focus on the work, results speak. Malik replied briefly, appreciating the check-ins without expecting more. They reminded him he wasn't entirely invisible. One evening, after a grueling shift hauling pallets, he found a small note tucked into his locker. "Keep proving them wrong. LC." It was unsigned in detail, but he knew the source. The gesture fueled him, a rare acknowledgement in a sea of doubt. The hostility peaked one frigid night. Malik was mopping up a spill near the break room when a burly coworker named Eddie accidentally knocked over a bucket of wastewater, splashing it across Malik's workstation. The liquid soaked his tools and papers, reeking of chemicals. Eddie laughed it off with a shrug. "Oops, guess you gotta clean that up too, your kind of smell anyway." The others chuckled nervously, but no one intervened. Malik's fists clenched, anger surging hot in his chest, but he forced it down. Retaliating would only confirm their biases. Instead, he grabbed a rag and wiped it up methodically, his jaw set in grim determination. By the time he finished, the shift had ended, and he walked home alone in the snow, the incident replaying in his mind like a loop. Week 3 brought the breaking point, or rather the turning point. It started like any other shift routine checks on the assembly lines, the hum of conveyor belts filling the air. But midway through, a sharp crack echoed from the main production line. Sparks flew from a junction box, and the entire belt ground to a halt with a groaning shudder. Alarms blared, red lights flashing as workers scrambled. "Overload!" Harris shouted, rushing over. "Get it fixed now, we're losing output every second." The crew milled about, pointing fingers. "Wiring's shot." Someone must have messed up the calibration. Chaos ensued. The line produced critical components for North Star's gadgets, and downtime meant thousands in losses. Experienced technicians tinkered with the controls, but the problem persisted, a tangled mess of frayed wires and jammed gears deep in the machinery. Harris paced, barking orders, his face flushed. Malik, who'd been restocking nearby, watched for a moment before stepping forward. "I can help," he said quietly. Harris shot him a dismissive glance. "You stick to sweeping, kid." But as minutes ticked by and the line stayed dead, desperation set in. "Fine." Harris relented. "But if you make it worse, you're gone." Malik dove in without hesitation. He wasn't formally trained, but years of odd jobs had taught him basics, fixing engines in his old town's garage, wiring lights for neighbors. He shut off the power-donned gloves and crawled into the tight space beneath the conveyor. The area was filthy grease coating everything, but he methodically traced the wires, identifying the short circuit. Sparks singed his sleeve once, but he pressed on, splicing connections and realigning gears with steady hands. Sweat dripped into his eyes, the confined space amplifying the heat from the machines. Around him, co-workers watched skeptically, murmuring doubts. Hours passed, 2, then 3. Malik emerged briefly for tools, his face smeared with grime, but returned each time with renewed focus. Finally, with a careful twist of a wrench, he secured the last connection. "Try it now," he called out. Harris flipped the switch. The line whirred to lifebelts, moving smoothly, alarms silencing. A collective exhale filled the room. Workers patted each other on the back, but eyes turned to Malik as he climbed out, exhausted but triumphant. Harris approached, his expression a mix of surprise and reluctant approval. "Didn't think you had it in you," he admitted gruffly. "Saved our asses tonight." Malik wiped his brow, nodding. "Just doing the job." Word spread quickly. By morning, the night crew was buzzing about the new guy's fix. Lila received the report via email from Harris, detailing the incident without embellishment. She read it twice, a subtle nod of respect forming. For Malik, it was the first crack in the wall of isolation. He'd proven something not just to them, but to himself. After the production line incident, the atmosphere at the North Star plant began to shift, albeit slowly and unevenly. Malik clocked in the next evening with the same quiet determination, but something was different. Whispers that once carried barbs now held a note of reluctant curiosity. Tom, the wiry veteran who'd been vocal about his doubts, approached during the pre-shift huddle. "Heard you pulled that line back from the brink," he said gruffly, not quite meeting Malik's eyes. "Not bad for a rookie." It wasn't an apology, but it was progress, a crack in the facade of exclusion that had walled Malik off since day one. Mr. Harris, too, showed signs of change. In his morning report to the higher-ups, he detailed the downtime and recovery without his usual cynicism. The new hire, Turner, stepped up. He'd written in the email to Lila, "Fixed the wiring issue when the vets were stumped. Kept us from losing the whole shift." Lila read the message in her office at headquarters, the city lights of Minneapolis twinkling beyond her window. She leaned back in her chair, a faint sense of vindication settling in. She'd taken a risk on Malik, and it was paying off not just for him, but as a quiet statement against the biases she'd fought her whole career. Back at the plant, the crew's thaw continued in small ways. During lunch, a couple of guys invited Malik to join their table for the first time. "You know your way around wires," one said, passing him a thermos of coffee. "Ever work on cars? My truck's acting up." Malik shared a tip he'd picked up from his old jobs, and by the end of the break the conversation flowed easier. No forced politeness, just shop talk. Eddie, the one who'd spilled the wastewater, avoided him altogether, but the overt hostility faded, replaced by a grudging respect, earned through sweat and results. Malik's workload didn't lighten. Harris still piled on the tough assignments, but now there were offers of help. A senior tech showed him shortcuts on the forklift, and another lent him a pair of insulated gloves for the colder tasks. These gestures minor as they were chipped away at the isolation that had weighed on him. For the first time, Malik felt like he was part of the machine, not just oiling its gears from the outside. A few days later, Lila made another unannounced visit to the plant. This time she arrived mid-shift, her presence announced by the click of her boots on the concrete. The workers straightened instinctively, but she waved them off, heading straight for the assembly area where Malik was calibrating a new batch of components. She waited until he finished a cycle before speaking. "Turner," she called softly. Malik looked up, wiping grease from his hands. "Ms. Chen, didn't expect you again so soon." She gestured for him to follow her to a quieter corner near the storage racks. "I got the report from Harris. You saved the line impressive." Malik shrugged modestly. "Just did what needed doing." Lila's eyes narrowed, assessing him. "Most people would have waited for orders or backed off. You didn't. I know what it's like to be underestimated, people assuming you don't belong because of how you look or where you're from." She paused, her voice dropping. "I've dealt with it my whole life in this industry. Boards questioning my decisions because I'm a woman or because of my background. But you've handled more in 3 weeks than some handle in years." Malik met her gaze, surprised by her candor. "It's not easy," he admitted. "The comments, the looks, they add up. But I can't let them win." Lila nodded, a rare warmth breaking through her composed exterior. "Exactly. That's why I gave you the shot. Not pity potential. You've earned respect here and from me." For a moment the plant's noise faded, and Malik felt a genuine connection. This wasn't just a boss checking in. It was acknowledgement from someone who understood the fight. Their conversations grew from there. Lila started dropping by more often, ostensibly for inspections, but always finding time for a quick word with Malik. One evening after a long shift, she lingered as he clocked out. "Walk with me," she said. Outside, under the sodium lights of the parking lot, snow flurries dancing in the air, she opened up about her own struggles climbing the ladder at North Star while fending off doubters who saw her as a token hire. Malik shared fragments of his past, growing up in a small town where opportunities were scarce, the constant pressure to prove he wasn't a stereotype. "Folks like us," he said, "we have to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal." Lila agreed, her breath visible in the cold. "But when we do, we change things for ourselves and others." These exchanges deepened their bond, turning Lila from a distant figure into someone Malik could confide in. He began to see her not just as the Iron Lady, but as a person with her own vulnerabilities, fighting similar battles in boardrooms instead of warehouses. As another Minnesota winter dragged on, blanketing Minneapolis in relentless snow, Malik's life at the North Star plant settled into a rhythm he could finally call his own. Months had passed since the line incident, and his probation had ended with a formal offer, full-time status benefits, and a bump in pay. No fanfare, just a curt nod from Harris as he handed over the paperwork. "You've earned it," the manager said, his tone gruff but genuine. Malik signed on the dotted line, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. He was no longer the outsider proving his worth. He was part of the crew trusted with more complex tasks like overseeing minor repairs and training new hires on safety protocols. The change in his co-workers was subtle but profound. Gone were the sidelong glances and muttered doubts. In their place came casual nods in the halls, shared jokes during breaks, and invitations to after-work gatherings at the local diner. Tom, once the skeptic, clapped him on the back one day after a smooth shift. "You're all right, Turner. Glad you're sticking around." Even Eddie kept his distance, the earlier antagonism replaced by uneasy silence. Malik didn't gloat. He simply kept working his efforts, speaking louder than any confrontation could. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, not as a token or a quota, but as a valued hand in the operation. Lila's role in his world grew beyond the occasional check-in. What started as professional oversight evolved into something warmer, more personal. She invited him to join community outreach projects. North Star sponsored volunteering at local shelters, organizing tech workshops for underprivileged kids in the suburbs. "We give back because we can," she'd say during their drives to events, her voice steady but laced with conviction. Malik opened up more too, sharing stories of his upbringing, the dreams he'd shelved under the weight of expectations. Lila listened intently, revealing glimpses of her own path. The boardroom battles, the isolation of leading as a woman of color in a male-dominated field. "We both know what it's like to fight for a seat at the table," she'd admit over coffee after one event. Their evenings together became routine, simple dinners at quiet spots downtown, away from the plant's noise. Lila, once the epitome of unapproachable poise, let her guard down around him. Laughter came easier. She'd tease him about his endless energy on the job, and he'd counter with questions about her latest innovations. "You're more than just the boss," he told her one night as they walked through a snow-dusted park. "You've got heart under all that steel." Lila smiled, a rare, unguarded expression. "And you've got strength I envy. You've changed how I see things here." The pinnacle came at North Star's annual anniversary gala, held in a rented hall downtown. The event celebrated the company's milestones, with executives mingling among plant workers in a rare show of unity. Malik attended in his best shirt, feeling a mix of nerves and accomplishment. Lila took the stage midway through, her presence commanding the room. "Tonight, we honor not just our successes, but the people who make them possible." She began, her voice echoing over the crowd. She spoke of innovation and teamwork, then paused, her eyes finding Malik in the audience. "I want to highlight someone who's exemplified what North Star stands for: resilience in the face of doubt. Malik Turner joined us under tough circumstances, but through sheer determination, he's become indispensable. He's not just fixed machines, he's shown us all what real grit looks like." The room erupted in applause, heads turning toward Malik with nods of approval. Harris raised a glass from his table, and even Tom joined in the cheers. Malik stood humbled as Lila continued. "We hire the best, but we also hire those brave enough to challenge biases like Malik has. He's a reminder that strength comes in many forms." The ovation swelled, and for Malik it was validation he'd never imagined. After the speech, co-workers shook his hand, offering words like "well-deserved" and "proud to work with you." In the quiet aftermath, as the event wound down, Malik found Lila by the exit. "That meant a lot," he said softly. She nodded, her expression warm. "You earned every word. You found your place here, and maybe more." With Lila by his side, Malik had discovered not just a job, but a second family. In a city that once felt hostile, he'd carved out belonging through perseverance, and in Lila, a partner who saw him fully. It was a new beginning, one built on trust and quiet triumphs.